The rehearsal dinner invitation had arrived with a handwritten note from my sister Diane. Please dress appropriately. The Kensington family has certain standards. Nothing too casual or cheap-looking. I stared at the note written in her careful script and felt the familiar sting of her judgment. Diane was marrying into the Kensington family. Old money, political connections, society page regulars. And she was terrified I'd somehow tarnish her perfect descent into their world. You understand why we can't have you in the wedding party, she'd explained 3 months ago, her voice syrupy with false regret. Gregory's family is very image-conscious. They've asked that all bridesmaids and groomsmen meet certain criteria. Professional success, polished appearance, appropriate social standing. And I don't meet those criteria, I'd said flatly. You work for a nonprofit, Morgan. You live in a tiny apartment. You shop at thrift stores. Gregory's mother would have a fit if she saw you in the wedding photos. We can't risk you embarrassing us. Embarrassing them. Because I'd chosen humanitarian work over corporate careers. Because I measured wealth in impact rather than income. Because I wore second-hand clothes and didn't care about designer labels. What Diane didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was exactly what my nonprofit work entailed. And who I'd worked with for the past 6 years. I texted Ambassador Rafael Santos. Diane's wedding is this weekend. She's asked me to dress appropriately and stay out of photos. His response came immediately, unacceptable. Send me the details. I'll attend. I smiled. You don't have to do that. I insist. You saved 30,000 lives with your water infrastructure project. The least I can do is attend your sister's wedding and make her understand what real accomplishment looks like. I'd met Ambassador Santos 6 years ago when I was 27, working for Global Water Initiative. We brought clean water systems to communities without safe drinking water. I'd been coordinating a massive project in his country, 60 villages, 30,000 people, a complex infrastructure overhaul. The project had been failing when I'd arrived. Corruption, poor planning, vendor issues. I'd spent 18 months fixing it, working with local communities, navigating political complexities, and ultimately delivering clean water to every targeted village. Ambassador Santos had been the Minister of Infrastructure then. He'd called my work the most effective humanitarian project he'd witnessed. When he'd been appointed UN ambassador 2 years ago, he'd specifically requested I serve as an advisor on international water and sanitation initiatives. For 4 years, I'd split my time between field work and advising the UN on global infrastructure policy. I'd briefed the Security Council twice. I'd helped draft international agreements on water access rights. I'd coordinated projects across 23 countries. But I still lived simply. Still wore thrift store clothes. Still worked for a nonprofit salary. Because the work mattered more than the compensation. My family saw the nonprofit job and the simple lifestyle. They assumed I was struggling doing charity work, because I couldn't succeed in the real world. They'd never asked for details. Never wanted to hear about the villages I'd helped, the policies I'd influenced, the lives I'd changed. Diane certainly didn't want to hear it. She wanted me quiet, invisible, not ruining her society wedding with my second-hand dresses and humanitarian career. Saturday would be interesting. The wedding was at the Kensington estate. Sprawling grounds, historic mansion, 200 guests in formal attire. I arrived in a simple black dress I'd found at a consignment shop, elegant but understated. Diane spotted me immediately and rushed over, her face tight with anxiety. Morgan, thank God you're here early. Listen, I need you to stay in the back during the ceremony. The photographer needs clear shots of the wedding party, and we don't want any distractions. Distractions, I repeated. You know what I mean. Gregory's family is very particular about aesthetics. Your dress is fine, thank you for that, but just keep a low profile, okay? Sit in the back, don't talk to anyone important, and please don't mention your work if anyone asks what you do. Why not? Because saying you work for a nonprofit makes us sound like we're struggling, she hissed. Like we come from a family that can't afford real careers. Just say you're between jobs or something vague. Gregory's mother, Patricia Kensington, appeared in a designer suit and disapproving expression. Diane, darling, who is this? My sister Morgan, Diane said quickly. She's just arrived. Morgan, this is Patricia Kensington, Gregory's mother. Patricia's eyes swept over me dismissively. The nonprofit worker. Yes, Diane mentioned you. How ignoble to work in charity. Though I suppose not everyone is suited for professional careers. I smiled politely. Some of us prefer impact over income. How quaint, Patricia said, already losing interest. Diane, the photographer needs you. And please ensure your sister stays out of the formal photos. We want this documented properly. They swept away, leaving me standing alone near the entrance. A wedding coordinator approached apologetically. Miss Chin, I have you seated at table 17. Near the back, close to the service entrance. Of course. Hidden away where I couldn't embarrass anyone. I checked my phone. Ambassador Santos had texted, arrived at hotel. Security detail is coordinating with venue. See you shortly. I replied, this is really not necessary. You've spent 6 years improving global water access. Your sister hasn't asked about it once. This is absolutely necessary. The ceremony was beautiful. I sat in the back row, watching Diane marry Gregory Kensington in a cascade of flowers, string music and society elegance. She looked genuinely happy and I was glad for her. But the small digs continued. During the receiving line, when distant relatives asked what I did, I said I worked in international development. Oh, volunteering abroad, one aunt exclaimed. How sweet. When are you going to get a real job? Non-profit work is so selfless, another said with pitying eyes. But you must barely scrape by. If you ever need help, the family can assist. I smiled and said nothing. The reception began with cocktail hour. I stood near table 17 watching the Kensington family hold court. Politicians, business executives, society figures all competing for their attention. Patricia Kensington was introducing Diane to a senator. My new daughter-in-law comes from a lovely family. Working class but lovely. Working class. As if my humanitarian career was something to be ashamed of. Then the energy in the room shifted. Security personnel appeared at the entrance. 4 of them in dark suits, professional and efficient. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Ambassador Rafael Santos entered, distinguished in his formal attire, the UN insignia pin on his lapel catching the light. The room went absolutely silent. He scanned the crowd, found me at table 17, and his face broke into a warm smile. He crossed the reception hall directly toward me, bypassing the Kensington family entirely. Morgan, he said, embracing me. It's wonderful to see you. I'm so glad I could attend. Every eye in the room was watching. Ambassador Santos, I said, returning the hug. Thank you for coming. You really didn't have to. Of course I did. After everything you've done, attending your sister's wedding is nothing. He spoke clearly, his voice carrying. Besides, I wanted to meet your family. The people who raised someone capable of changing 30,000 lives. Diane had stopped mid-conversation with the senator, her face pale. Patricia Kensington stood frozen, champagne glass suspended. Gregory looked confused, clearly trying to place why a UN ambassador was embracing his wife's charity worker sister. Ambassador Santos turned to address the room, his diplomatic presence commanding instant attention. I apologize for arriving unannounced. I'm Rafael Santos, UN Ambassador for Infrastructure and Development. I'm here to celebrate Morgan Chin, a remarkable humanitarian who has been my primary advisor on international water policy for 4 years. The silence was absolute. Morgan has overseen infrastructure projects in 23 countries, he continued. She's briefed the UN Security Council on global water access. She's drafted international agreements that have influenced policy in 40 nations. Her work in my country alone brought clean water to 30,000 people. 60 villages that had never had safe drinking water. He paused, letting the information sink in. She's been nominated 3 times for humanitarian awards. She's consulted for the World Bank and WHO. She's one of the most respected voices in global infrastructure development. Patricia's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. So when Diane mentioned her sister worked in non-profit charity, Ambassador Santos said with a slight edge to his pleasant tone, I wanted to attend to ensure everyone understood exactly what Morgan's work entails. Because humanitarian infrastructure development isn't charity. It's expertise, leadership, and global influence. He smiled at me warmly. Morgan, shall we find our table? I believe we have much to discuss about the Somalia project proposal. The reception descended into chaos. Guests crowded around phones, frantically Googling my name. Articles appeared about water projects, UN briefings, international policy initiatives. My LinkedIn profile showed connections to ministers, ambassadors, and NGO directors worldwide. She advised the UN Security Council? Someone whispered, reading their phone. 3 humanitarian award nominations, another said, scrolling. There's a photo of her with the Secretary General. She's consulted for the World Bank? That's major international policy work. Diane pushed through the crowd toward me, Gregory trailing behind, both looking shell-shocked. Morgan, Diane started, her voice shaking. I didn't know. The ambassador, the UN, you never said you worked at that level. You never asked, I said quietly. You assumed non-profit work meant I was unsuccessful. You asked me to hide in the back, stay out of photos, not mention my career. You called me an embarrassment. But the UN Security Council, Gregory said, clearly trying to process. My father has been trying to get meetings with Ambassador Santos for 2 years. For business development. You've been advising him for 4 years. Yes. Patricia Kensington appeared, her earlier condescension replaced with frantic social calculation. Morgan, we had no idea you were so well connected. When Diane said non-profit work, we thought. You thought I was beneath you, I finished. You seated me at table 17 near the service entrance. You told Diane I'd ruin your society photos. You introduced her as working class to your political friends. Patricia flushed. That was a misunderstanding. It was accurate, I interrupted. Based on your understanding of success. You measure worth by wealth and social status. I measure it by impact. We use different metrics. Ambassador Santos had been listening, his expression hardening. Ms. Kensington, I've been reviewing economic development proposals from your husband's firm. Perhaps we should discuss whether his company's values align with the humanitarian principles the UN prioritizes in partnerships. The implied threat was clear. Gregory's father's business needed UN connections. Those connections ran through Ambassador Santos, who was clearly displeased. That's not necessary, I said quickly. This is a family matter, not a professional one. Isn't it? Ambassador Santos said. When families dismiss humanitarian work as embarrassing charity, when they hide accomplished professionals at back tables because they don't perform wealth appropriately, that speaks to values. And values matter in partnerships. Patricia had gone pale. Gregory looked panicked. Diane pulled me aside as the reception struggled to recover its celebratory energy. Her makeup was ruined from crying. I've ruined everything, she said. The ambassador hates us. The Kensingtons are furious. Everyone knows I called you an embarrassment. It's all over social media. Someone filmed the speech. You did ruin your wedding, I said. But not because I came. Because you hit me and looked down on me instead of ever asking what I actually do. Why didn't you tell me, she asked. Why let me think you just did small charity work? I tried, I said. At Christmas 2 years ago I mentioned advising the UN on water policy. You changed the subject to wedding venues. Last Thanksgiving I talked about briefing the Security Council. You interrupted to discuss Gregory's family. Every time I brought up my work you brushed it off as charity stuff. She winced. I thought you were exaggerating, making your job sound bigger than it was. It is big, I said. 30,000 people have clean water because of my projects. Countries changed their water policies because of my briefings. That's not drama. That's impact. But you live in a tiny apartment. You wear thrift store clothes. You don't look successful. Because I spend on what matters, not what impresses, I said. My apartment is small because I travel often. My clothes are used because they work fine. I don't perform success, Diane. I live it quietly. She looked down. I'm sorry. For hiding you. For calling you an embarrassment. For never caring enough to learn what you actually do. I know, I said gently. But Diane, if we stay in each other's lives, you need to respect me even when you don't understand my choices. Even when I don't fit your picture of success. Ambassador Santos stayed for the rest of the reception. He made sure everyone knew my work and credentials. He introduced me to the senator Patricia wanted to impress. He discussed my infrastructure projects with several politicians. After that, no one dared dismiss me again. Gregory's father came over, trying to sound friendly. Ambassador, maybe we can talk about development deals. Send them through proper channels, the ambassador said coldly. I'll review them with Morgan's input. Infrastructure is her specialty. The man nodded, realizing the power had shifted completely. Later, Patricia Kensington came to me near the exit. The arrogance was gone. Morgan, I owe you a real apology, she said. I judged you for how you dressed and where you lived. I thought you weren't successful because you didn't show off wealth. You did, I said simply. I was wrong, she said. Your work changes lives. You brief the UN. You influence world policy. That's success money can't buy. No, I said. It can't. Will you forgive me? I looked at her, the woman who once called me an embarrassment. The woman who now knew I had more global influence than anyone at her wedding. I'll give you a chance to do better, I said. For Diane's sake. But I don't need your approval. I already have meaning in my work. That's enough. 6 months later at dinner, Diane asked about my projects. Really asked. I told her about the Somalia water plan, the new policy models, the UN briefing coming up. She listened carefully. Asked smart questions. For the first time, she truly wanted to understand. I'm proud of you, she said finally. I should have said that years ago. You should have, I agreed. But you're saying it now. Patricia Kensington had become almost deferential, treating me with careful respect. Gregory's father's business proposals had been reviewed and approved after I'd ensured they met humanitarian standards. The wedding video had gone viral. Bride hides sister, UN ambassador reveals her achievements had trended for days. Diane had been mortified initially, but eventually accepted it as a learning moment. Everyone asks about you now, she told me. At society events. They want to know about the UN work, the water projects, the policy initiatives. You're more interesting than anyone else in our social circle. I'm not trying to be interesting, I said. I'm trying to bring clean water to people who need it. I know, she said. That's what makes you actually interesting instead of just performing interesting. I still live in my small apartment. Still wear thrift store clothes. Still work for non-profit salary while advising ambassadors and briefing the UN. Because real success isn't about performing for society photos. It's about impact, purpose, and work that matters. Diane learned that lesson at her wedding when the ambassador walked in. The family that said I'd embarrass them learned it when they discovered I had more international influence than anyone in the Kensington social circle. And sometimes, the sister you hide at table 17 is actually the most accomplished person in the room. You just have to be wise enough to ask about her work instead of judging her thrift store dress. The UN ambassador understood that. Eventually my family did too.